Skips and strategies that save tens of seconds or even minutes are easy to talk about. They are flashy and often bring out that "how is this even possible?" reaction. On the other end of the spectrum are skips that are typically missed, ones that save 1/10 here or 100th there. Ultimately, however, they often matter the most, especially in a highly competitive scenario. So today I'll show you all the small tricks speedrunners use in BeamNG to squeeze out even the tiniest advantage, from exploiting the game's simulation quirks to understanding car physics on a deeper level. BeamNG is a game with many different approaches to its difficulty as a whole, and it's no wonder that players try to minimize it whenever possible, especially since almost every patch new and even crazier car setups pop up. Sometimes those vehicles have a ton of issues, with one of the most prominent being a lack of downforce. While it's true some cars like Scintilla or SBR4 have a huge advantage with their aero kits, other setups, especially J2 variants, have nothing of the sort. Players do try to experiment with different parts, but over time it was unanimously decided that the only way to deal with the lack of aero was by simply not doing so. There was no solution until Akimbo Beta, one of the best tuning experts in the speedrunning community, had a crazy idea. Akimbo took a regular J2 truck with an engine and equipped it with a bed cover and Nomi GTRX wing. This was already well known and disregarded as a viable option, as the huge amount of rear downforce worsened the already bad front lift. To put it simply, it became more of a plane than a car. However, Akimbo managed to impress everyone with a simple showcase by going backwards and making a J-turn. You can actually flip the bed cover to be upside down on top of the engine and radiator, essentially turning J2D series into one of those sprint dirt racer cars. While it sounds and even looks ridiculous, this gives a lot of front downforce and helps during tough corners, like those on dirt oval. But this was a trick that is literally used on one vehicle in the entire speedrunning scene. Time to expand. Scenarios in BeamNG are very unique. While it's true some of them might be long or near impossible without correct lines, their difficulty firstly comes from experience driving one particular vehicle. After that comes skips and nothing else. At least that's what was thought. After all, tuning and weight reduction via the garage is impossible. But as with everything in the game, physics still applied at full force. Aerodynamics is one of the most important aspects for any racing vehicle in the game. So much so that experienced players put the hood and glass back on Scintilla to not lose precious seconds. The same goes for scenarios. Several months ago, speedrunners found out that opening the rear of the vehicle, hatches or tailgate can actually boost overall performance of vehicle in some scenarios. After some testing and talk between speedrunners, it turns out the amount of time saved really depends on the vehicle. A more powerful motor or bigger hatches means more impact. Take for example Gavril Jump Course, a pretty well-known map where the difference between first and second place is only 1/10. Current world record holder Serzari used every trick possible, including opening the tailgate. But in the grand scheme of things, it didn't matter. For the majority of the run, he was behind Scrat, the previous world record holder. Only due to Serzari's experience, he was able to catch up in the last two corners. Having the tailgate open at such low speeds actually provided about 1/10 of a time save at most. However, on missions like Knockway Block Trot and Fearless with much faster or larger trucks and overall straighter path, opening the larger tailgate gives a substantial increase of roughly half a second. Trying to bend the physics is one way to get an advantage, but what about actual technical skills? There are a few tricks that don't rely on parts or setups, just pure driving precision. Let's start with one small trick that feels more like wizardry than anything else: clutch feathering. The name might give you an impression of this trick being easy, but that cannot be further from the truth. It's not as simple as just use the clutch properly. In BeamNG and many other racing sims for that matter, doing it takes split-second timing and probably a minor degree in mechanical engineering on top. Rev the engine to its peak power, release the clutch just enough for it to bite, and keep the RPM from dropping the throttle while quickly building speed. It sounds convoluted, and all happens in less than a second. But when done perfectly, the car launches like a rocket. But one mistake, and the launch will go sideways very fast. The amount of time saved from this trick can vary a lot, from 1/10 to half a second. So let's take a look at one of the best showcases for this trick BeamNG has to offer. Map number 10 from Senseless Destruction. This is a 10-second mission. Drive forth and hit a wall, while trying to stop as fast as possible afterwards. While this map has a lot of neat little tricks and skips that can save roughly 3 seconds, clutch feathering all by itself gives roughly half a second advantage here, and it can lead to a make it or break it situation. But there is also a second secret clutch trick. It's hidden in the game's settings of all places. See, BeamNG has a bunch of input filters that smooth the activation of throttle, brake and clutch. This is typical and completely on point for any racing game. However, speedrunners managed to find a unique use for one of those filters called Direct. Turns out, when it's enabled, all smoothing disappears. It turns the clutch into an instant on-off switch. It sounds minor, especially with all the wild physics tricks people already pull off, but it's technically faster. And that's all speedrunners need to care about. Sure, it doesn't save much, maybe a few frames every time the clutch is used, but that's the thing about BeamNG speedrunning. Players refuse to leave even a single millisecond unoptimized. There are, of course, even more weird and specialized tricks hidden in BeamNG, stuff like using arcade ABS, launching in higher gears, or even binding nitro to the gas pedal. They might sound small, but in the right situation, each of them can completely change how a run plays out. Let's start with arcade ABS. On paper, it should be worse than realistic one, but for some reason, BeamNG simulation disagrees. The arcade version actually uses real airspeed, while the realistic one works with an estimated wheel speed. While the difference can be negligible, most of the time arcade ABS is simply faster, even if just by several frames. That and the arcade version also provides cars without ABS with one. And if by chance built-in version is present, it literally overrides it. Granted, there are a lot more at play. Some cars perform better with realistic ABS, while others with arcade. In some cases, like off-road driving, turning it off is just faster. You might have seen that I talked about launches quite a bit in this video already, and it's true, technical skills are rather limited without getting deep into the nitty-gritty of things, such as tuning. But there is still one more trick that speedrunners use widely, and it's higher gear launches. Some cars, especially highly tuned ones, tend to overperform at the start, which leads to unoptimal shifting. To battle this and increase time under power, starting in second or even third gear is required. In some weird cases, even starting in fourth or fifth is optimal. Finally, nitro on throttle. While on paper it's less effective and can lead to damaging the engine, the pros are huge when applied correctly. Sometimes cars really need that push on the power between shifts. A great example is the blender bolt scenario. That heavy armored truck desperately needs every bit of power it can get. The difference between using this trick and ignoring it is a whole gear, and with such a slow vehicle it matters a lot, especially with spinning flails damaging it from every possible direction. Time to jump into strategies that literally cut time from the map by going around obstacles or using clever tricks to propel the car forward. Let's jump into very important parking. There is literally no space to drive around. However, when did this small problem stop speedrunners? By hitting columns in the parking lot, Serzari initiates power slides, which save several tenths each time. Difficult, precise, and can lead to a restart, but it works, and it's one of the smallest skips there is in the game. Camper Mishap has another interesting skip, or rather ignore of a straight path in favor of a jump. While it has a huge and flashy cut of nearly a ton of weight, the main aspect is still driving. There is a specific spot located in the middle of the route with a jump, but it can be avoided, and while logically, with BeamNG's physics in mind, going over a gap is bad, since cars don't accelerate in the air, going on the side is even slower. Not by much, but just enough to be noticeable. This is one of the very few places where ignoring the ramp is a bad idea. Finally, we have a racetrack circuit on Automation Test Track. This is probably the most famous time trial in all of BeamNG, and it all can be credited to one person, or rather vehicle he created, No Engine Jato. This map features one of the longest flights in the entire game, and the strategy for this map is still being updated with small tricks. One of those right at the start, about 10 seconds into the run. Before, runners slowly pushed to the road divider and used it to line up and push downhill. Now they just jump over it. This saves roughly a second, while being probably the biggest time saver of all the small strategies on this list. This was only a small portion of all skips and strategies that are available to speedrunners. With nearly 300 different missions, almost each one has something to skip, from small jump that provide a huge amount of momentum to ridiculous fuel tank ruptures that actually provide a huge amount of weight reduction and time savings. The same goes for technical skills. There are probably more to be discovered as time moves on. After all, with constant updates come constant risk of possible glitches, bugs and unintended features. For now, however, this is all that I have time for. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. This will help a ton, and I hope to see you in the next one.